Jeremy.
Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for having me at the FCPEXchange event. I don't know if you've seen this logo before. We've been advertising pretty heavily what's been the culmination of a year and a half of current development and a journey of about 7 years of working together with one of those little computer companies from America called Apple. And that partnership started in 2011 when we were very lucky to present an idea to the upper echelon of Apple's Executive Pro Apps team, where we said we'd really love to take ProRes to the camera and put it in a portable device. And it was a different way to think about it, and that inspires, technology development, and Apple was very, very supportive in that endeavor, and they gave us the ability to put what I would like to take the opportunity to thank the algorithm team within Apple for inventing ProRes, because it's made everyone's life a lot easier. Can I hear a round of applause for the ProRes team? It really is amazing what they've managed to do in CPU and keep quality really high. So what we did was take the video pixel from the camera, and this is going to be really important when we get to ProResRAW. The camera in the past needed to take these RGB Bayer pattern from a guy called Mr. Bayer. I can't remember his first name, but he was from Kodak. Does anyone know a company called Kodak? Pretty impressive in image quality. And I learned a few things while developing this new format with Apple and putting their format into our recorders. I learned that the RGB Bayer pattern that takes 4 red, blue, 2 greens, and then packages it up inside the camera to a pixel, an RGB pixel, that those sensor pixels are called sensors. I didn't know that before. So these sensors get packed up by the camera in normal ProRes workflow, and they become an RGB pixel. And then we take that, thanks to Apple, and we pack it into the ProRes algorithm, which is really efficient on CPU, and we put it onto a disk. And imagine if you took the sensor values and you packed them up. And that's where we're headed with the new format. So when we released this product, 250,000 ProRes devices have since been sold since 2011. That is a very big number of people who are recording, playback, monitoring, and editing. And lately, it's been going to 4K, and we've been enabling raw recording from the sensor of Japanese cameras, 240 frames a second, 4K P60, even now 5.7K. And we've been delivering monitoring of that on set like you see on this monitor. We've been taking those values and decoding them and putting them onto the screen and recording them in 2 different formats. One was ProRes, but we were doing the conversion from the sensor to the pixel. And when we did that, we had a choice to go to ProRes, but we were kind of already making some decisions for the customer, and they're not as creative as in a RAW workflow, which is a more cinema workflow. So we kind of solved half the problem. But if you wanted to stay in RAW, it was really cumbersome to work in, and it was only really the high-end Hollywood productions that could work in RAW previously. So it was only half solved. So about a year and a half ago, we started to discuss with Apple how we might take the RAW workflow and add the power of ProRes to it, and the ease of ProRes and the performance of ProRes to it. And we came up with ProResRAW. So what that does is allow us to continue to record ProRes at the camera, but we're recording the sensor values packed up into ProRes. So you get the flexibility of the RAW, of being right where the sensor data is, and you get all the performance of ProRes, which you saw Steve beautifully put 6, 7 streams of all these different frame rates, etc. And that means they're real-time decoding, they're converting it to video, they're applying HDR curves to it, and they're outputting it onto a big screen. That means you can work faster, which is exactly what ProRes, the original ProRes, did for us. What's our part in it? Well, we enable the recording from the camera makers. So instead of them having to redesign all their cameras, we sit on top of any of the cameras and we ask for the raw data coming out of the camera. Now, this is actually easier for the camera maker to do, because they don't have to do any processing on it. They just pump the RAW out of the SDI connector, and we accept it. So, in very Apple fashion, we have announced and shipped our product together to enable a workflow day one. So, as of this morning, at 9 o'clock, you could download new firmware for free for the Shogun Inferno and the Sumo 19. And they both record ProResRAW today, and they also are your monitor on set so that you can see what those sensor values look like in a real image, and you can set up and expose your shot correctly at the time. So we do 10.5 stops of dynamic range. It's a 1500 nit monitor. All of the exposure and setup tools are in our Atomos, which is the free upgrade. We do a RAW to SDR conversion, so downstream you can see it on normal monitors, so you don't have to upgrade all of your infrastructure at day one. The monitors are super high resolution, and you can follow 3D LUTs and looks of your choice through the whole process. We support the dot cube. Then we connect and we go to our imaging world friends, and what Atomos is about is connecting the imaging world to post-production. We sit in the middle and do what the camera makers aren't either able to do or thinking about, and we try and bring as much of that to the computer as possible, and especially to a Mac, because it's the best processing power in the world. And we can record from 9 cameras as of today. And they're the most affordable cinema cameras from the best camera makers in the world. Panasonic, Sony, and Canon. And we do up to 15 stops. We do 12-bit RGB RAW. But ProResRAW isn't limited to that. It can go even higher. 5.7K resolution, all the work that Final Cut Pro X did 3 or 4 years ago when they redefined the resolution independence, we can now use that. So all of that work has paid off. 240 frames a second, it doesn't matter what frame rate, it goes straight in. 12 gig SDI, we support that. And one of the most important things is the metadata from the camera. We record all of the metadata, we know what the white balance was, we know what the ISO setting was, we know what the shutter speed was, and it means we can do those real-time decoding and re-encoding to make everything work on the timeline. So it's a real partnership to make sure that the end-to-end workflow is seamless for the customer. And that's technology at its best. So this is we love this shot. It's the ProResRAW family. And not only do you set it up on set, record to a disk, an SSD, standard SSD. ProResRAW is fantastic. It can go onto a single SSD SATA disk, so you don't have to buy new PCI Express disks. They're today's disks, so they're affordable. And you take that disk and you pop it into a Thunderbolt or USB 3 docking station, and you connect it to your Mac, and then you edit it. And out of Thunderbolt from Final Cut, like onto the TV, you can also take that same monitor on set and connect it to your Mac. And then you can be monitoring and editing in real time from your Mac. So we enable both the on-set recording and monitoring and setup tools, and then we enable the real-time checking of that footage in an environment within Final Cut. The last thing, part of the equation, anyone who shoots video knows that you don't want to lose your footage. The last thing you want is to say, "Excuse me, bride, could you cry again in front of your father? I didn't quite get it." That's not something you really want to be telling the client. We preserve all the data. We've teamed up with the best drive makers and RAID array makers, and Sony's now making SSDs for us. G Technology are making RAID systems, and those caddies that you see down the bottom there go directly into our unit, and they populate into RAID systems where there's an offload port for us, so it's nice and seamless, and then you connect to the Mac. So you preserve it forever, and it's really fast transfer rates into the wonderful Mac computers. And I'm going to hand over to DJI.